The morning sun cast a golden glow across London, as thousands of people gathered along the historic streets leading to Westminster Abbey. Sarah Mitchell clutched her small Union Jack flag tightly, her heart racing with anticipation. She had camped out for 3 days, just to secure this perfect spot along the Coronation route. And now, the moment she had dreamed of was finally approaching. The crowd buzzed with excitement as police officers lined the barriers, their crisp uniforms reflecting the importance of this historic day. Children sat perched on their fathers' shoulders, their eyes wide with wonder, as they waited to witness something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Elderly couples held hands, sharing stories of previous royal celebrations they had attended decades ago. Behind the scenes at Kensington Palace, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before an ornate mirror in her private dressing room. Her hands trembled slightly as her stylist made final adjustments to her stunning coronation gown. The deep blue silk fabric shimmered under the crystal chandelier, and the intricate embroidery told the story of the Commonwealth through delicate golden threads. "Are you ready, Your Royal Highness?" asked her longtime lady-in-waiting, Margaret, who had been by Catherine's side through countless royal engagements over the years. Catherine took a deep breath, her emerald eyes reflecting both nervousness and determination. "I've been preparing for this moment my entire adult life," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the bustling activity around her. "But now that it's here, I feel like that university student who first met William all those years ago." Down the hallway, Prince William adjusted his ceremonial military uniform one final time. The weight of his future crown felt heavier than any responsibility he had ever carried. His valet, Thomas, had served the royal family for 30 years and recognized the mixture of pride and apprehension in the prince's eyes. "Your father would be proud, sir," Thomas said quietly, referring to King Charles, who had abdicated the throne earlier that year to allow the younger generation to lead the monarchy into a new era. William nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We're not just representing ourselves today, Thomas. We're carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire nation." Meanwhile, back along the coronation route, the crowd had grown to unprecedented numbers. Street vendors sold commemorative items, while volunteers handed out small cups of water to those who had been waiting for hours. The atmosphere was electric, filled with a sense of unity that transcended age, background, and social class. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, an 82-year-old grandmother from Yorkshire, had traveled to London specifically for this moment. She remembered watching Queen Elizabeth's coronation as a young girl, and now she was here to witness the dawn of a new reign. Her granddaughter, Emily, stood beside her, documenting everything on her phone to share with friends who couldn't make the journey. "Nan, why is this so important to you?" Emily asked, genuinely curious about her grandmother's devotion to the royal family. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with memories as she replied, "Because, my dear, these moments remind us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. The crown represents our history, our values, and our hope for the future." As the morning progressed, the sound of distant trumpets began to echo through the streets. The crowd fell silent for a moment, straining to hear the approaching procession. Hearts began to beat faster, and anticipation reached its peak. At Westminster Abbey, Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Michael Thompson, made his final preparations for the ceremony that would change the course of British history. He had officiated at William and Catherine's wedding years earlier, and now he would have the honor of crowning them as king and queen. The ancient abbey had been transformed into a magnificent spectacle of tradition and modernity. Flowers from every corner of the Commonwealth decorated the altar, while representatives from nations around the world took their seats in the historic pews. The combination of centuries-old ritual and contemporary celebration created an atmosphere unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. Back at the palace, Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, fought back tears as she watched her daughter prepare for the most important day of her life. The woman who had once been a flight attendant and built a successful party planning business was now watching her daughter become Queen of England. "I never imagined when you were a little girl playing dress-up that you would actually wear a real crown one day," Carol said, her voice thick with emotion. Catherine smiled, remembering those childhood games in their family garden in Berkshire. "Neither did I, Mum. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" The final touches were completed as Catherine's tiara was carefully placed upon her perfectly styled hair. The Spencer tiara, once worn by Princess Diana, caught the light and seemed to sparkle with the love and legacy of those who had worn it before. As the royal couple prepared to leave the palace, they took a moment together in private. William reached for Catherine's hand, and they stood in comfortable silence, drawing strength from each other as they had done countless times throughout their relationship. "Whatever happens today, we face it together," William said, his voice steady and sure. Catherine squeezed his hand in response. "Together," she agreed. The sound of horses' hooves on cobblestones announced that the procession was beginning to form outside the palace gates. The gold state coach, used for coronations for over 250 years, waited in gleaming splendor. Its intricate carvings and gilded decorations represented the very essence of royal tradition. News cameras from around the world were positioned at strategic points along the route, ready to capture every moment of this historic day. Commentators spoke in hushed, reverent tones as they described the significance of what was about to unfold. The crowd along the route grew restless with excitement as mounted police began to appear in the distance. Children pressed their faces against the barriers, hoping to catch the first glimpse of the royal carriage. The sound of cheering started as a low rumble and gradually built into a thunderous roar that could be heard for miles. Street musicians who had been entertaining the waiting crowds fell silent, knowing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Even the pigeons seemed to sense the importance of the moment, gathering on rooftops and lampposts, as if they too wanted to witness history in the making. As the first horses appeared around the distant corner, the entire city seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. This was more than just a coronation. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the long and storied history of the British monarchy. The magnificent gold state coach emerged from the palace gates like something from a fairy tale, its golden surface gleaming in the morning sunlight. The crowd erupted in cheers so thunderous that windows rattled in nearby buildings. People waved their flags frantically, tears streaming down their faces as they witnessed this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Inside the coach, Catherine felt her heart pounding as the roar of the crowd washed over them like a wave. She had attended countless royal engagements over the years, but nothing had prepared her for this overwhelming display of love and support from the British people. "Can you believe this?" she whispered to William, her eyes wide with amazement as she looked out at the sea of faces lining the streets. William smiled, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "They're not just cheering for us, Catherine. They're celebrating hope, tradition, and the future of our nation." As the coach slowly made its way down the mall, every face in the crowd seemed to glow with joy. Sarah Mitchell, who had waited 3 days for this moment, burst into tears when she finally saw the royal couple. She had met Catherine once at a charity event years ago, and the future queen had remembered her name and asked about her volunteer work with underprivileged children. "She remembered me," Sarah sobbed to the stranger standing next to her. "She actually remembered my name. She actually remembered my name." The stranger, a businessman from Cardiff named David Hughes, put a comforting arm around Sarah's shoulders. "That's what makes them special," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "They genuinely care about people like us." Eleanor Whitfield gripped her granddaughter's hand as the coach approached their section of the route. Her weathered face was streaked with tears, but her smile was radiant. "I've waited my whole life to see this," she whispered. "A new beginning for our country. A new beginning for our country." Emily captured every second on her phone, but she found herself lowering the device to simply experience the moment with her own eyes. The genuine emotion on Catherine's face was visible even from a distance, and it touched something deep in Emily's heart. As the coach passed through Admiralty Arch, the crowds grew even larger. Tourists who had flown in from around the world stood shoulder to shoulder with locals who had lived in London their entire lives. The coronation had brought people together in a way that transcended all boundaries. Among the crowd was James Patterson, a young soldier who had served with Prince William during their military days. He wore his dress uniform with pride, his chest decorated with medals earned during tours of duty overseas. When William spotted him in the crowd, the future king's face lit up with recognition, and he raised his hand in a small salute that only James could see. James felt his knees go weak with emotion. He remembered, he whispered to his wife, Rebecca, who stood beside him holding their newborn daughter. After all these years, he remembered, Rebecca watched her husband's face transform with pride and joy. She had heard countless stories about William's leadership and compassion during their military service. But seeing that personal connection play out before her eyes made everything real. The coach continued its stately progress toward Westminster Abbey, where crowds had been gathering since before dawn. The ancient streets of London had seen many coronations over the centuries, but this one felt different. There was an energy in the air that spoke of renewal and hope for the future. Inside Westminster Abbey, distinguished guests from around the world took their seats in the historic pews. Presidents, prime ministers, and royalty from every continent had come to witness this historic moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood at the altar, his ceremonial robes perfectly arranged, his face serene despite the magnitude of the occasion. Prince George, now a teenager, sat with his younger siblings Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis in the front row. They had been preparing for this day alongside their parents, understanding that their family was about to change forever. George, as the future heir to the throne, felt the weight of his destiny settling on his young shoulders. Charlotte reached over and squeezed her older brother's hand, offering him the same comfort and support that their parents had always shown each other. Louis, despite his youth, sat with remarkable composure, his eyes fixed on the altar where his parents would soon be crowned. Back along the route, the coach was now approaching Westminster Abbey, and the crowd's excitement reached fever pitch. News commentators struggled to make themselves heard above the thunderous cheering. The sound was so overwhelming that it seemed to come from the very earth itself. Catherine and William could see the abbey in the distance now, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens like prayers made of stone. The magnitude of what was about to happen began to sink in fully. In just a few short hours, they would emerge from that building as king and queen, carrying responsibilities that would shape not only their own lives but the lives of millions of people around the world. "Are you ready for this?" William asked his wife one final time as they approached their destination. Catherine looked at him with eyes full of love and determination. "I've been ready since the day I said yes to your proposal. We're going to do great things together, William, for our children, for our people, and for the future of this great nation." The coach finally came to a stop outside Westminster Abbey, and the crowd fell into a hushed reverence. This was the moment when the informal celebration of the procession would give way to the solemn ceremony that would change everything. Palace guards in their scarlet uniforms formed a pathway from the coach to the Abbey entrance. Their faces were stoic and professional, but even they couldn't completely hide their emotion at being part of this historic day. As William stepped down from the coach first, extending his hand to help Catherine descend, a collective gasp went up from the crowd. Catherine's gown was even more magnificent than anyone had imagined. The deep blue silk seemed to capture and reflect every ray of sunlight, while the golden embroidery told the story of the Commonwealth in threads that sparkled like stars. The Spencer tiara caught the light as Catherine moved, creating a halo effect that made her appear almost ethereal. The crowd stood in respectful silence as the royal couple paused for a moment at the Abbey entrance, turning back to wave one final time before disappearing inside. That wave would be replayed millions of times on television screens around the world. Catherine's smile was radiant but touched with the gravity of the moment. William stood tall and proud beside her, his hand resting gently on the small of her back in a gesture that spoke of their partnership and mutual support. As they disappeared through the Abbey doors, the crowd outside remained in place, unwilling to break the spell of this extraordinary moment. Many people were openly weeping, overwhelmed by the beauty and significance of what they had just witnessed. Inside the Abbey, the couple was greeted by the haunting sound of the choir beginning the opening hymn. The ancient stones seemed to vibrate with the power of voices raised in harmony, creating an atmosphere that was both reverent and joyful. Catherine's train was carefully arranged by her attendants as she and William took their places before the altar. The weight of history pressed down on them, but so did the love and support of everyone gathered in that sacred space. The Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forward, his voice clear and strong as he began the ceremony that would transform a prince and princess into a king and queen. Every word carried the weight of 1,000 years of tradition, yet felt fresh and new in this moment. Outside, the crowd listened to the ceremony through speakers that had been set up along the route. Every prayer, every vow, every moment of the ancient ritual was shared with the people who had come to witness this historic day. The coronation had begun, and with it, a new era in British history was dawning. Inside Westminster Abbey, the coronation ceremony reached its most sacred moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury lifted St. Edward's crown, its ancient gold and precious stones catching the light that streamed through the abbey's magnificent stained glass windows. The crown had been worn by monarchs for centuries, and now it was about to rest upon William's head. The silence in the abbey was so complete that the rustle of silk gowns seemed to echo off the ancient stones. Catherine watched with tears in her eyes as the crown was slowly lowered onto her husband's head. The weight of it seemed to transform him before her very eyes from the man she had fallen in love with at university into the King of England. "God save the King," the Archbishop proclaimed, his voice ringing through the abbey with authority and reverence. The congregation erupted in the traditional response, "God save the King." The words bounced off the walls and soared up to the vaulted ceiling, carrying with them the hopes and prayers of everyone present. Outside, the crowd heard those same words through the speakers, and thousands of voices joined in the ancient cry. Sarah Mitchell felt chills run down her spine as she added her voice to the chorus. This was the moment she had dreamed of for 3 long days of waiting, and it exceeded every expectation. Now came Catherine's turn. She approached the altar with grace and dignity, her deep blue gown trailing behind her like a river of silk. The Queen Consort's crown, specially created for this occasion, waited for her on a cushion of royal purple velvet. As she knelt before the Archbishop, Catherine thought of all the women who had come before her. She thought of Queen Elizabeth, who had ruled with such wisdom and grace for so many decades. She thought of Princess Diana, whose memory lived on in the Spencer tiara that graced her head. She thought of her own mother, watching from the congregation with tears of pride streaming down her face. The Archbishop's voice was gentle but firm as he spoke the words that would make Catherine queen. "Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the people of this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, according to their respective laws and customs?" "I solemnly promise so to do," Catherine replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion of the moment. As the crown was placed upon her head, Catherine felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. But she also felt something else: the love and support of her family, her friends, and her people. She was not carrying this burden alone. "God save the Queen," the Archbishop proclaimed. "God save the Queen," came the thunderous response from every corner of the abbey. King William and Queen Catherine turned to face their people for the first time as crowned monarchs. The sight that greeted them was extraordinary. Every face in the abbey glowed with joy and pride. Their children sat in the front row, George now standing tall and proud, Charlotte beaming with happiness, and young Louis clapping his hands with uncontainable excitement. The newly crowned king and queen walked slowly down the aisle, acknowledging friends and family members who had been part of their journey. Catherine's eyes found her parents in the crowd, and she saw her father wiping away tears with his handkerchief, while her mother blew her a kiss. As they reached the abbey doors, the sound from outside grew to a deafening roar. The crowd had been waiting for hours to see their new monarchs, and when the doors swung open to reveal King William and Queen Catherine in all their crowned glory, the reaction was overwhelming. The couple stepped onto the abbey steps, and every camera in the world seemed to flash at once. Catherine's crown caught the afternoon sunlight and created a sparkling display that left the crowd gasping in awe. William stood beside her, every inch a king, his presence commanding respect and admiration. They paused at the top of the steps, taking in the incredible sight before them. The crowd stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of Union Jack flags waving in celebration. The love and support from their people was almost tangible, filling the air with positive energy. Eleanor Whitfield, the elderly grandmother from Yorkshire, was sobbing openly now. "I never thought I'd live to see another coronation," she told her granddaughter Emily. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." Emily put her arm around her grandmother, feeling the historic significance of the moment deep in her bones. She realized that this was something she would tell her own grandchildren about someday, a memory that would be passed down through generations. As the royal couple descended the steps toward the waiting state coach for their return journey to Buckingham Palace, the crowd's enthusiasm reached new heights. People threw flower petals and confetti into the air, creating a shower of color that danced around the newly crowned monarchs. James Patterson, the former soldier who had served with William, saluted smartly as his old friend passed by. This time, both William and Catherine noticed him, and the new queen inclined her head gracefully in his direction, acknowledging his service and loyalty. The return journey to Buckingham Palace was unlike anything London had ever seen. If the procession to the Abbey had been magnificent, the return was absolutely spectacular. The crowd had grown even larger, if that was possible, as people poured into the streets from every direction to catch a glimpse of their newly crowned king and queen. Inside the coach, William and Catherine held hands as they processed through their capital city. The weight of their crowns was nothing compared to the weight of responsibility they now carried. But they faced it together, as they had faced everything else in their lives. "We did it," Catherine whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "No," William replied, squeezing her hand. "We're just beginning." As they approached Buckingham Palace, they could see the famous balcony where they would appear before their people. The mall was packed solid with celebrating crowds, and the noise was so intense that it seemed to shake the very foundations of the palace. The coach pulled into the palace courtyard, and the couple was quickly escorted inside for a brief moment to compose themselves before their balcony appearance. Palace staff bustled around them, making final adjustments to their ceremonial robes and ensuring that their crowns were perfectly positioned. "Your Majesties," said the master of the household, using their new titles for the first time. "The people are waiting." William and Catherine exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding and mutual support. Then, hand in hand, they walked toward the famous balcony doors. As they stepped out onto the balcony of Buckingham Palace, the roar from the crowd was unlike anything in royal history. The mall was a sea of people stretching all the way to the horizon, and every single person seemed to be cheering at the top of their lungs. King William raised his hand in acknowledgement, and the crowd somehow managed to cheer even louder. Queen Catherine curtsied gracefully to her people, her crown sparkling in the afternoon sun. The sight of her in her magnificent coronation gown against the backdrop of the Union Jack flying proudly above the palace created an image that would be remembered forever. Their children joined them on the balcony, creating a picture of the royal family that represented both tradition and the promise of the future. Prince George stood tall beside his father, already showing signs of the king he would one day become. Princess Charlotte waved enthusiastically at the crowd, her natural warmth and charisma evident even at her young age. Prince Louis, despite his youth, seemed to understand the significance of the moment. As the family waved to their people, Royal Air Force jets flew overhead in perfect formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky. The sight was so magnificent that even hardened news commentators found themselves struggling to find words. Sarah Mitchell, still standing in her spot along the route, was crying so hard she could barely see. "This is the most beautiful day of my life," she told the strangers around her, who had become like family during their long wait together. David Hughes from Cardiff nodded in agreement. "This is what it means to be British," he said with pride. "This is what we're all about." As the royal family finally withdrew from the balcony after several appearances, the crowd began to slowly disperse. But the celebration continued throughout London and across the Commonwealth. Street parties sprang up everywhere, as people came together to share food, stories, and their joy over the day's events. In living rooms around the world, families gathered around television sets to watch the endless replays of the coronation highlights. The image of Catherine's radiant smile as the crown was placed on her head was already becoming iconic. The sight of William's steady, confident presence as he accepted his destiny was inspiring people everywhere. That evening, as the newly crowned king and queen finally had a quiet moment together in their private apartments, they reflected on the extraordinary day they had just experienced. "The people were incredible," Catherine said, still wearing her crown as she looked out at the London skyline. "Did you feel that love and support?" William joined her at the window, his own crown catching the light from the palace chandeliers. "I felt it," he said quietly. "And I know that we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to be worthy of it." As they stood together, looking out over their kingdom, both knew that this day had changed everything. They were no longer simply William and Catherine. They were king and queen, servants of their people, guardians of a 1,000-year tradition, and symbols of hope for the future. The coronation was over, but their reign was just beginning. And based on the overwhelming love and support they had received from their people on this magical day, it promised to be a reign that would be remembered for generations to come.